Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to replace the transmission detent springs on a Honda S2000. Stiffer transmission detent springs are supposed to make shifting feel more crisp and responsive, so I'm installing these to see if they work. It is recommended to remove the transmission to install these detent springs, but we all know that sucks, so I'm going to show you how to do it the easy way. Anyways, let's get to it. The first thing you want to do is get the entire car on jack stands. You'll want the jack stands pretty high, as you'll be spending some time completely underneath the car. The next thing you want to do is remove the catalytic converter, which will give you better access to the right side of the transmission. If you need help doing that, I've got videos that will be linked down below. Once the catalytic converter is removed, you'll want to also remove the primary oxygen sensor that is attached to the header. Use a 22mm wrench or an offset oxygen sensor socket to loosen the oxygen sensor and remove it from the header. Prior to lowering the transmission, you'll want to use a 10mm socket along with a really long extension to remove the 4 bolts securing the shift boot to the frame of the car. Place a floor jack underneath the transmission or the transmission mount, and then use a 14mm deep socket to remove the 3 transmission mount bolts. There are 2 on the driver's side and 1 on the passenger side. Once the bolts are removed, you can lower the floor jack and remove the jack. There are a total of 7 detent springs in the Honda S2000 transmission. 5 of them are located on the right side of the transmission, and 2 of them are located on the left side of the transmission. Each of these springs is responsible for a certain movement of the transmission. All the springs are the same except for the left-right spring, which should be replaced with only the black replacement spring. The process for replacing all the detent springs is the same. The only thing you need to take special care of is the left-right spring, so let's knock that one out first. Use a 12mm socket and a 3/8" ratchet to break loose the detent bolt. It's going to be a tight squeeze for some of these bolts. Back out the bolt and remove it by hand if possible. When you remove the bolt, watch out for any detent balls that may fall out. Remove the detent spring inside of the bolt and replace it with a single black detent spring in the replacement kit. Dab some Honda Bond or equivalent onto the detent bolt where the threads meet the mating surface. Get the bolt started by hand and then use a 12mm socket and 3/8" ratchet to tighten the bolt. Torque it to 16 foot-pounds. Repeat this process for the other bolts. You may want to use varying extensions in order to make things fit easier depending on the bolt. When you're ready to button things up, you'll want to place a floor jack underneath the transmission or the transmission mount and jack up the transmission mount until it is flush with the frame of the car. Use a 14mm socket to reinstall the 3 transmission mount bolts. Torque the bolts to 28 foot-pounds. Once torqued, you can remove the jack. Next, you'll want to reinstall the shift boot to the frame of the car. Use a 10mm socket and a long extension to reinstall the 4 bolts, securing the shift boot to the frame of the car. Torque the bolts to 7.6 foot-pounds. With that done, you'll want to reinstall the primary oxygen sensor. Use a 22mm wrench or an offset oxygen sensor socket to reinstall the oxygen sensor to the header. Torque it to 16 foot-pounds. Now you'll want to reinstall the catalytic converter. If you need help doing that, I've got videos that will be linked down below. The last thing you want to do is get the car off jack stands and lower it back down to the ground. If you take your car for a spin, you'll now notice that the shifter takes quite a bit more effort to move around. Personally, I do feel that it makes shifting more crisp and responsive. When you do start to enter a gear, the springs make the shifter want to launch into the gear, which is an interesting feeling. But given all the effort that it takes to install the springs, I can't recommend them to everyone. If you've installed a set of these yourself, feel free to share your opinion about them down below in the comments. See you in the next one.